All right, welcome everybody. It's another Village Torah discussing the Torah portion. I'm Rabbi Drew, your host, and I'm really fascinated in this week's Torah portion, which is called Parashat Yitro. It's Yitro, and it's called Yitro because it starts off with Yitro, the father-in-law of Moses, of Moshe, coming to visit Moses and encamped with the rest of the children of Israel. And I'm not going to go into this, but there is a really fascinating scene in which Yitro sees what Moses is doing in judging the people all day long without any delegation. So he advises Moses, why should it entirely be upon your shoulders when you can delegate? And ultimately Moses takes his father-in-law's advice. We have not only this Moses taking his father-in-law's advice about delegating so that people don't stand around waiting all day long to have their court cases to be adjudicated, to be heard. That's how we open. But it gets, I mean, that's exciting, as you know,
Yes,
that's an important aspect of leadership, is delegation, but also really any nation for judging or adjudication really can't rely simply on one person. Delegation is important, but there's more. We also have perhaps what this Torah portion is most famous for, most well known for, is the giving of the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai. This is huge. This is not only
no, this was after. Yeah,
right. Not only is it the giving of the Ten Commandments, it's also significant because this is really the beginning of really sort of the national revelation of the Torah and all the commandments to the Jewish people. So we do have that Moses and the Jewish people, the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of them, waiting to hear and receiving these commandments. Although, interestingly, towards the end of this week's Torah portion, we have the Jewish people, the Israelites, saying, we can't, this is just too much for us to bear to directly hear these things from God. Moses, speaking of delegation, Moses, can you go and just hear all the rest of them for us? And that's what we're gonna see that next week's Torah portion as we go on to hear more. But for now, this is really the outset. This is the beginning of this revelation of all the giving of all of these commandments, giving of the Torah to the Israelites. So we have the Ten Commandments, which I'm going to pull up on screen. So we have, there's a bunch of them. So I want to start talking about them, but I'm deeply fascinated by a particular aspect, which I'm going to go get into. We have, of course, the first commandment: I, the Lord, am your God. I'm God. That's
I can't see
it's
it.
interesting when it's interesting when we talk about the Ten Commandments, because they're actually not even called the Torah doesn't even call them the Ten Commandments. They are called Aseret Dibrot, these 10 statements, 10 utterances, 10 things. So even this one that we see starting off of I, the Lord, am your God, is not so much of a commandment, but it does certainly fit in to be called a statement, a thing. So this is the first one. And of course, the second one is not bowing down to any of them nor serving them. For I am the Lord your God, and it keeps going. Then we have, you shall not swear falsely by the name of the Lord your God. And because the Lord will not clear one who swears falsely by his name. We have a very famous one, the fourth commandment, which is remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days shall you labor, for the seventh day, etc. For in 6 days, the Lord, etc., etc. And then we have this fifth commandment: honor your father and your mother, that you may Laman ya'arichun yamecha, that your days shall be lengthened upon Hadama Asher Adonai Elohecha nosein lach, upon the land which the Lord your God gives you. And then we move into a whole bunch of much shorter statements or commandments. You shall not murder. That's one. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. And then we have, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male or female slave, his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that is your neighbor's. And then that's it, because then we see in this next verse, all the people witnessed the thunder and lightning, the blare of the horn, and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they fell back and stood at a distance. This was deeply and significantly impactful for them. And this is what I mentioned earlier, referring to earlier. You speak to us, they said to Moses, and we will obey, but don't let God speak to us lest we die. That something about this experience was so, it was a lot. It was just so much to take in. So whether it was the maybe the visual experience, the oral experience, something about the pressure in the air, it's unclear from this, just the biblical text, what it was that was too much for them, and that they had mortal fears. They feared that they would die were they continued to directly hear these things from God. Strange. It's unclear exactly what it was leading to their potential death here. Now, what I want to highlight, this is just, it's on my mind for now, and so it's something I want to explore. We certainly have definitely here, right, in the latter part of the commandments of you shall not murder, you shall not all do all these things. Some of them are more self-explanatory, more so than others. They really need no explanation. Why shouldn't you steal? Well, it leads to a breakdown in society. Why not murder? Okay, all these things. But what's really fascinating to me, I'll be honest, I really love thinking about the journalistic questions, the 5 W's and H. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Many of these in this 10 commandments here in chapter 20 really don't deal with a lot of these questions. But what really intrigues me, and I certainly do this so much, and maybe this is a distinctly me, like a Rabbi Drew thing, but I love looking at the Torah, what we have in the Torah, the various mitzvot, the various commandments that are in the Torah, and thinking, why? Why do we have this? Why are we expected or commanded to do X, Y, or Z? We actually get some explanations, at least on some of these. Yeah, we don't have any explanation. Why not murder? Why not steal? Why not covet? Although for those, we can come up with reasons, and it doesn't really take a lot of imagination to come up with reasons to proffer for these. Now, this is where it gets interesting. There are reasons given for some of these. For the very first statement, I am the Lord your God, no reason is given. But this is where it gets interesting with the second commandment. So we have, I'm just going to have it on my screen, and if you want to follow along with the various verses here in chapter 20, you can find it if you need a Bible, if you need a book of Exodus, if you need a Chumash, please let me know. In the meantime, we have here, if you want to follow along, so I, the Lord your God, right? So we have chapter 20, just bring it back up. I, the Lord your God. So this is verse 2. Don't have any other gods. Okay, so now we have, you shall have no other gods beside me. That's verse 3. You shall not make for yourself a sculptured image or any likeness of what is in the heavens above or in the earth below or in the waters under the earth. That's verse 4. Verse 5, you shall not bow down to them, nor shall you serve them. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. That should have been enough, right? We actually have a reason. You shall not bow down to them, nor shall you serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am an impassioned God, visiting the guilt of the parents upon the children, upon the 3rd generation, upon the 4th generation of those who reject me. There's a flip side, though, but showing kindness to the thousandth generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. This jealousy, I am a jealous God. That's a reason? Apparently it is. If we were to think about it in a different context, think about it in a relationship context, that really is what is going on here. This is a relationship between God and the Jewish people. If we were to think about it in a marital context, we would say it's like, it's basically cheating, right? So if someone were to go off and cheat on their spouse, the other person would be really jealous, really upset, right? This impassioned God himself right here is saying, I am jealous. I will get really emotional. I will take it out so far down the line, which is so deeply fascinating here, what we have in chapter 20, that God himself is saying, I'm going to flip out on you and you're going to suffer. Generations down the line will continue to suffer. I'm not sure how much of a it's just such an interesting reason. I don't think any of us would have expected this emotional, passionate aspect of why go off and cheat on me? Don't you serve other gods? And yet that is what God is telling the Israelites in the verse, which is an interesting reason, as opposed to saying, for instance, I would have expected God here to say, I am the Lord your God. I am the Lord your God. I took you out of Egypt. We are forming a relationship here. This is part of what we do. We have a sense of fidelity to each other. But instead of using that rational explanation of we have this relationship, it goes in an emotional direction of, I'm going to be really jealous. I'm going to be extremely emotional, and don't you dare cheat on me. Really fascinating with other gods. Don't go around cheating on other gods. Really interesting. Okay. So we have in the next verse, the next commandment, which is found in verse 7, you shall not swear falsely by the name of the Lord your God. Now, swearing is basically promising someone, I promise you, I actually did make the bed, right? I swear to you, I made the bed this morning. I swear to you, I made my directional while turning at that light. I swear to you that I turned off the lights when I left the room, whatever the case may be. Or I swear I did not steal that lollipop from that 2-year-old, whatever it is. But the point is that when we swear on different things, we're promising and basically something is vouchsafing. We are vouchsafing that, I swear on my, people say, I swear on my mother's grave or something extreme like that. What's here is you can swear. God isn't saying don't swear using my name. He is simply saying don't swear falsely using my name. Really curiously, an explanation is given. And the explanation, again, is not like we would expect. The explanation of not swearing falsely in the name, using the name of the Lord your God, because the Lord will not clear one who swears falsely by God's name. Really interesting. I would have expected it instead of God's not going to clear you. Interesting move. I would have expected it, again, something a little bit more rational. This comes across more emotional of God's not going to clear you. He's going to be so upset that you swore falsely in his name. This really is more of, you might think you're getting away cleanly, but it's actually going to entangle you and make things difficult. That one's a little bit murky as an explanation. We get a really long one when it comes to the Sabbath, to Shabbat. We have very simply put in verse 8, remember the Sabbath day to sanctify it. Very simple. The very next verse explains almost a little bit further what's included. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. And then it continues in verse 10. But the seventh day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God, or a rest day of the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your slave, nor your maidservant, nor your cattle, nor even the stranger who is within your gates. This is, I'm gonna pause. Really, I'm gonna go off on a little tangent. I mentioned to you, I'm really fascinated in using the matrix of these journalistic questions: the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, the how. Most of these in the Ten Commandments don't really discuss so much the who. Here is a very clear and explicit articulation of the who, and it even goes beyond our expectations. The who, of course, you, your son, your daughter, those we expect. What's a little bit further is, what about your servant and your maidservant? What about those two? Oh, that's interesting. They're not really part of who you are. What about your cattle? Cattle, they're not even people. And even the stranger who is within your settlements. And now, again, these are people who are not part of the Jewish people, and yet everybody is really supposed to take a break and relax. No expectations should be made that labor or work should be done on Shabbat, on the day of rest. It's very interesting in thinking about the who aspect. Okay, now in the very next verse, in verse 11, we get into the why. We get into the reason. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth and sea and everything that's in them. And he rested on the Sabbath day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and sanctified it. Really fascinating. This is the entire reasoning. It goes back to God's creating everything at the very outset of creation, 6 days working, on the seventh day, blessing the Sabbath day, blessing the day of rest, and sanctifying it. Sanctifying can sound really abstract. What does that mean to sanctify? It's really a little less abstractly is to make it distinct, make it different, and to make it special. That is really what's going on. God, and if God, who is this, God is super duper powerful, way more powerful than human beings are. If even God took 6 days of working and relaxed and rested on the seventh day, shouldn't we, in a way of imitating and copying God, really, and following his footsteps, if we don't have as much strength as he does, all the more so we should be taking that seventh day. And there's a Latin expression used, imitatio Dei. Imitatio Dei is imitating God, that we follow in God's footsteps. And that's really what this verse is urging us to do. Imitate God, follow his footsteps. Just as he worked 6 days, you shall work 6 days and relax on the seventh. What's really fascinating to me, and this connects this reasoning back to the very first line that we saw in verse 8, is that it talks about the very last word here is God blessing this. He blessed the Sabbath day and he sanctified it. Well, what is the commandment in verse 8? It's to remember the Sabbath day to sanctify it. That this sanctification, this remembering, we should then make sure to do it in order to sanctify it, to make it separate, to make it special. I'm going to sound a little preachy. I typically don't use this rabbinic modality of speech, but I'm going to do it, which is, I love the Sabbath. It's hard for me to think about living life without Shabbat in my life. This wonderful blessing of having this day dedicated to a reset. It's basically a weekly reset of one's life. There's so much that happens within a week. So much happens within our 6 days of productivity, of doing things, of toiling, of just being engaged in the world and doing stuff. It's nice to take a day and to take a step back and to say, I'm going to make this day separate. I'm going to use it as a day to relax, to rest, to recover, to recuperate, and recharge for this week to come. And this opportunity of recharging is really incredible and re-energizes us to tackle the week to come. It's so unfathomable to me of those who, it's hard to think about my life without it. And I'm so grateful that we have this commandment that God gave us as a Jewish people to relax, to rest, to take a step back, to reflect, not just to recharge, but to reflect also, and to take a step back, get a sense of where we are, and connect with those around us. So I'm going to step off my rabbinic soapbox, but I just had to say how wonderful, how great it is that God gave us this day of rest. It's such an incredibly and wonderful blessing. All right, stepping down from my rabbinic preachy soapbox. Okay, now we have also one final reasoning given attributed to one of these commandments, and that's found in the next verse, which is verse 12. And this has to do with honoring one's father and one's mother. Honor one's father and honor your father, honor your mother, lema'an, in order that ya'arichun yamecha, your days shall be lengthened, upon the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Now this is interesting. When I think about what's the purpose here, right? Yes, I think we can all acknowledge that honoring one's father and one's mother is a good thing. What's really fascinating is one would have expected, I don't know about you, I would have expected, why should one honor one's father and one's mother? Provide stability. I don't know. One can think of a lot of things. But in order that you shall live longer, that's not the most automatic thing that would have come to mind. I'm sure someone could come up with a kind of a cynical thing of, well, if you don't respect your parents, they'll make things tough for you, or even jokingly, your mother will kill you, or of something of that nature. But less jokingly, it could also be that if we were to think about the family as a microcosm of society at large, that if we were to have a society in which people do not respect hierarchy, do not respect their parents within the family, they wouldn't respect society at large. They wouldn't respect the sort of the way society is structured to provide a sense of stability in a broader sense, right? If one can't even have that stability in one's home, in which people are providing for you, your parents, things can break down really quickly and devolve into a lack of civility, not just in the home, but within society writ large. And also we have this, it pops up here and there, this reasoning throughout the Torah associated with some commandments, but it's actually not that frequently employed, which is what's particularly fascinating in its usage here. So to sum up, we have these commandments in the Ten Commandments. Some obviously are much more terse and have zero reasoning. They happen to be a little bit more self-explanatory. Don't murder, don't steal. Okay, that's very simple. Or those are a lot more straightforward and self-explanatory. We also, however, have this set of commandments that do have reasonings attributed to them, that proffer reasons, whether it's don't go off and serve, don't go straying on me and serve other gods, because I'm a jealous God, is a really interesting one. Of course, we have Shabbat, which is the lengthiest reason given, which is about imitating God and what God did in separating that seventh day as a day of rest and sanctifying it. So too, we should remember to sanctify it. So it's something, I don't know, who knows, maybe as we continue, it's something I will focus on, of thinking about reasons attributed to specific mitzvot, to specific commandments, and thinking about how that plays out. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this was insightful. And thank you so much for watching, and Shabbat Shalom.